learned as partnerships and as stakeholding is a nice word. Everybody uses it. United Nations is fond of all these words. I think the development jargons, that's the greatest lesson I've learned in my 36 years of being in this space, is we use a lot of nice jargons. We invent every meeting we have, every time United Nations meet, new fashion statements emerge, and then we talk about it for the next 5 years. And then life goes on as usual. So SDGs are similar, MDGs are similar. I'm not a skeptic of any of this, I'm just very pragmatic. But I learned my lessons from indigenous tribals with whom I had the privilege of living for 30 years. And I start off my understanding of stakeholding with a story, and possibly I'll not even present after that. And I know I'll run out of time because the story is quite interesting. Many, many years ago, I was a young physician who went into this forest, living with very indigenous communities, considered to be primitive tribes in India. I don't know why we even coined these words primitive. I think they are the most advanced societies I've lived with, in my own view. And this particular chieftain called Masti was working in a government hostel, so he was known as Hostel Masti. He used to be drunk most of the time. And occasionally he used to be sober. And during one of the moments of sobriety, I went up to him and said, "You are called Jenu Kurbas. Jenu is honey. I really want to know how do you fetch honey from the forest?" And it's a national park, officially a national park. It's very strange. We call it stakeholding, but the state is the largest stakeholder, taking away the stake of every other person in the community. That's what it did to the tribals. And I said, "I want to come with you." So he took me to the forest one day, 4 other tribals with him. We went around 4-5 kilometers into the Bandipur National Park. And suddenly he showed me a beehive, which is around 30-40 feet on top of a large rosewood tree. He called a young man, Kala, and said, "Why don't you climb up this tree and get the honey?" And I was surprised. All that Kala had was a sickle in his hand. And like a monkey, within seconds he was up the tree, near the beehive. And I went to a safe distance. Born in Bangalore, educated in Bangalore, a physician, I thought all the stories of bee stinging and all that came to my mind, so I went and stood in a safe distance. And this young boy, around 20-25 years, climbs up and he doesn't cut the hive. I was watching him, and Masti and his other tribal took the towel from his shoulder, held on to the towel at the two ends and standing below the hive. And I was expecting some magic to happen from a very safe distance. Kala puts his hand into the hive, and it's very strange. You know, the Jenu Kurbas somehow believe that Jenu is honeybee, it will never bite them. I used to joke and say, if people start having a bath, it will bite you, because your smell is so bad, it will never come near you. That's a joke I used to have with them. He put his hand into the beehive, removes the queen, and stretches out the other hand, puts the queen under the hand. All the bees fly back and forms a hive on his hand. 5-6 kgs of hive is holding on his hand like that. And then slashes the hive, leaving the top 2/3 as it is on the tree, just the bottom 1/3. It falls, the rest of the tribals catch it and they squeeze it out with the pupa, larvae, wax, everything. You should taste it, it's very good actually. And Kala climbs down, but before he climbs down, he takes his hand again, puts his hand into the hive in his other hand, pulls out the queen, puts it back on the hive. All the bees fly back into the hive. All this in 2-3 minutes. Before you know what's happening, it's all done. And then they're coming back. Well, they go, the Jenu Kurbas are singing in their language. At that time, I didn't know their dialect, so I didn't learn their dialect at that time. Well, coming back, they're singing. And I couldn't contain my impatience and my irritation at Masti and his friends. I said, "How stupid can you be? You climb up a tree 40 feet high, you walk 4 kilometers one way, and then you collect this much honey? Well, all the honey is up in the hive itself." It doesn't follow the laws of economics at all, because we are all trained, and I was trained in the same law of economics. We are all trained to believe in a world of profit maximization. That's exactly what we are all trained in. But Masti, thankfully, did not believe in profit maximization. He believed in the paradigm of benefit optimization. And he explained it so beautifully in his own indigenous tribal way. He said, "Do you know what the song was when you came towards the beehive?" I said, "No." He said, "As we were walking towards the beehive, we were singing about the industriousness of the bee and how powerful they are. They fly all over the forest, collect pollen, do all the hard work, and we're appreciating the bee. And do you know what the song is as we're walking away with the honey?" I said, "No." He said, "We're asking forgiveness of the honeybee for stealing what is rightfully its. And we're telling the honeybee, we had to take the little because we need it. We also have to benefit from your honey. So please forgive us for the stealing." And I said, "But all the honey is there. Honey is not with you. He said, that is why you look at it. We look at it as it is there for the bees because they brought it for themselves. We stole from it, and this is what is, in my opinion, real sustainable development, where the rights, responsibilities, and privileges of the industrious people are respected. We live in a society, my friends, we're talking of SDGs, but we live in a society where our oceans are damaged. 3 crises, which is all created by mankind: the ecological crisis, the crisis of inequities, 1% of India owning 73% of India's wealth, the 50 top people of the world, you can put them in one bus and they control more than 50% of the global GDP. And what are we talking? How can you really make the world equitable? We cannot. Let's be realistic. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a pragmatist. I believe as long as we subscribe to the paradigm of profit maximization, sustainability is a myth. What we need is a new sector to emerge, the 4th sector economy to emerge. We need the government. They are the principal drivers of development. That's the first sector. And all the principles of public administration, the safety net for the poor, the marginalized. We need an agency like that. The second sector, the private sector, has done enough damage. They've done good too. I'm not even against them. I'm not anti-corporate in any way. The sector I belong to, the civil society groups, we have our own DNA which is good, but all our DNA is not good. So what we need is the best. The real partnership should be partnership of principles. The principles of the public sector, the principles, efficiency principles of the corporate sector, the fairness, justice, and equity principles of civil society, together to create a new stakeholder economy. A stakeholder economy which operates on principles of benefit optimization. And that alone is a real principle of partnership. Look at the short-sightedness of the UN SDG 17. I've been a reasonably vocal critic of it. My view is SDG 17 is limited because it leaves out the people for whom the partnership is all about. SDG 17 only talks of and stresses, lays emphasis on the partnership between public and private sector. How can you limit development to just public and private? There's a huge body of citizens, of people, of communities. The Arunachal experiment, or all the experiments in the morning of the small ponds and the farm ponds and the lakes we saw, is because of communities. So real partnership can happen only when all the stakeholders of development, who all exist for the people. So if you cannot have a partnership without people, it is no partnership at all. So I believe that lesson is what that hostile master taught me. It's not just people. Every living creature on this earth is a partner in development. And that is what Master taught me. That little honeybee, whom we don't recognize, which no law gives it the freedom to fly, but it flies because it is nature's law, it's God's law. And that's the way partnerships have to be built. So I think we need to wake up. And I believe Himalayas can be saved, and a national model, why a global model can emerge from the Himalayan belt if we learn to get these principles of partnership together. And I conclude with just, my slides are only about 7 R's or 6 R's I say. And I believe this is a paradigm on which partnership should operate. The first R is each of us bring different resources to the table. The state brings resources, I bring resource, people bring resource. Everybody's resource has to be respected. Today we respect monetary resource, only fiscal resources. We don't seem to respect other resources at all. The intellectual resource of the indigenous communities is simply ignored. We need to bring resources to the table. The second R is we need to define responsibilities of each stakeholder. The world cannot move by just one person becoming very responsible, everybody else being irresponsible. The third resource is, the third R, I believe, is roles of people. We need to define roles. What are the roles of citizens? Like, I love the way the chair said that it has to be the level at which people can absorb and deliver. So we have to define roles based on the capacities. The fourth R is there are going to be risks in every partnership. Let me tell you, if you partner with me, it's going to be very difficult because I have my own paradigms of development and you have your own paradigms. How do we really manage our risks intelligently is something we need to resolve. The fifth is, how do you really share the rewards? If the rewards are not shared based on principles of benefit, then it's going to be an inequitous society again. So we got to really understand how to share rewards. The sixth is, how do you review performances? Constantly review your partnership. If all these principles are really being deployed properly, are we being really living these principles, and then only will a partnership work. If partnership is not based on this, you don't need an agreement to write. But if you have conviction in the spirit of the 6 R's, then I think a truly sustainable world can emerge. And that is what is the SDG 17 in its letter and spirit. Thank you all for your time.